Good morning, everyone. It is Monday, December the 2nd, 2019. It is currently 7:46 a.m. Central Time, and you're listening to a live broadcast of the Theology-Central podcast. This is the podcast where we take some time to look at your world from a theological perspective. We try to make theology central to everything we talk about, and well, today, let me just say this. We are in debt. And who really cares? We are in debt, and obviously no one seems to care. And I know this is a radical thought, but you cannot spend more money than you actually bring in. I know, shocking, revolutionary. Aren't you glad you tuned into a podcast to give you such revolutionary information? Aren't you glad you tuned into a podcast to tell you something you've probably never even considered? You cannot spend more money than you bring in. If you don't have money for something, you should not get it. If you cannot afford it, you should do without. It seems like such a simple idea, right? Seems like a simple philosophy, a very simple principle. However, let's just say this. It seems our political leaders are not aware of this idea. And it seems that many individuals are not aware of this idea. Because we are all in debt and no one really cares. Let me point out two news articles. Now, I'm not going to go in depth with these news articles. I'm just going to use the basic information to lead us to, a theological consideration, a biblical consideration. And, you can see how this applies maybe to your life and how maybe we need a change of thinking within our government, within the world of political leaders. And forget the political leaders. I think within the citizens of the United States of America. We'll talk about all of this. Are you ready? Let's dig in this morning. I didn't go through all my normal introductions. Yes, this is a live broadcast. If you would like to hear this live broadcast when it's actually live and listen to all of our other podcasts, please go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and look for Spreaker, Spreaker, Spreaker. Download the Spreaker app. Once it is downloaded, do a search for VBC. That is us. You'll tap on By Victory Baptist Church. It will bring up all of our different podcasts. Go to each one, make it a favorite, and please follow us. Now, right after I said I wasn't going to do my normal introduction, then I stopped to do that. But it is important because we spend a lot of money and time and effort to get everything on the Spreaker app, so we would like people using that if all possible. But that's not what we're here to talk about, right? We're here to talk about debt. We're all in debt, and no one cares. Do you care? Does anyone care? Well, the answer seems to be no. No one actually does. Here is the first story. Headline: $1 trillion deficits as far as the eye can see, and hardly a voice of caution to be heard. Let me read that again. $1 trillion deficits as far as the eye can see, and hardly a voice of caution to be heard. In the old days, a decade or so ago, Democrats would have assailed Donald Trump's failure on federal deficits. Instead of eliminating it, as he promised, the deficit has doubled to $1 trillion as far as the eye can see. There would have been a time Democrats would have been up in arms. Look, the deficit's out of control. The deficit's out of control. We're in debt. Something needs to be done. And I know that some people will draw a distinction between deficit and debt. I understand that. But for the purpose of this, I'm just using a general idea here. There would have been a time when Democrats would have been going crazy. They would have been losing their mind. The deficit, the debt, and because, well, the Republicans the president is a Republican, and so they would have been going after him for that as a major campaign platform. We've got to cut the deficit. We've got to get out of debt. This has to stop. Now, of course, once Democrats are in power, well, then they just run up deficit as well. And then it's the Republicans saying, we need to cut the deficit. We need to cut the debt, because they use the deficit and the debt sometimes as a political tool more than they actually care about the deficit or the debt. And why? Well, to take care of the deficit, quote unquote debt, guess what you have to do? You have to stop spending more than you take in, which means that whichever political party goes after the debt and the deficit, once they get in power, they realize, if we're going to actually fix the problem, we've got to cut this, we got to cut this, we got to cut this. And the minute you start cutting things, people get upset and you do not remain in power very long, because it seems like the way to remain in power is to spend money. In a sense, you spend money to maintain power. When you don't have the power, you scream at everyone for spending the money. It's kind of crazy. That's how it has worked in the past. But the times are a-changing, because now, whether Democrat or Republican, no one really cares that we're in debt. Both sides are like, we need to spend more money. We need to spend more money. We need universal health care. We need to eliminate the school debt. We need to do this. We need to do this. We need this program. We need this program. We need a wall on the southern border that could cost billions, trillions of dollars. It doesn't matter. We need, and that has now become the cry of both parties. Now, yes, there's always exceptions, and one of the parties, there'll be someone saying, hey guys, we're in debt. But for the most part, it no longer matters. Let me go back to the story here. In the old days, a decade or so ago, Democrats would have assailed Donald Trump's failure on the federal deficits. Instead of eliminating it as he promised, the deficit has doubled to $1 trillion as far as the eye can see. Republicans would be in full fury over the spending schemes of Democratic presidential candidates. Even the mainstream moderates propose huge increases for health care, education, and the social safety net for the disadvantaged. Yet, deficits as a political issue are dead. I want you to hear that again. Yet deficits as a political issue are dead. In reality, no one cares. We are in debt. We have a deficit, trillions of dollars. No one really cares. Now, yes. I love when this is how it kind of works now in the political world. A Democrat will be in one of the national debates, so-called debates, more political speeches, okay? But all right, they call it a debate, and they'll be on national television for a national debate, and they'll propose one of their programs. We need to eliminate all college debt. We need, universal health care. We need this. We need that. We need that. And someone, and then on the next day, say on, conservative talk radio, they're like, this program will cost us $20 zillion, right? Okay, I'm just making up numbers, right? Will cost us all of this money, and they will criticize it, right? But listen, when the Republicans propose all kinds of programs that cost all kinds of money, they won't criticize it. Now, yes, there are exceptions. There are some who will criticize both for their spending insanity, but for the most part, this is no longer a political issue. It is dead. It's not even a priority. No one really cares. Everyone's tired of hearing about it. We get the report, okay, that we now have the national deficit is now at this level. It gets reported here or there, but there was a time this was This was a big political hammer that you could, smash the other side with. Now, again, even in the past, I still think it was fake. You went after the side that was in power about the deficit, but once you got in power, you continue to increase the deficit, because to stay in power, you have to spend money. Because the American people, they're kind of like children, right? You take the children to the store and they want this and they want this and they want that. They have no concept of money. They have no true concept of, wait a minute, that costs this much money. We don't have that. They just know they want it. And the American people are a lot like that. Hey, we sent you to Washington. Now we want this. We don't care how much it costs. We want it. Give it to us now. And you have to look at the children, the American population, and say, sorry, no. We can't take care of your school debt. Can't do it. You got yourself in debt. You chose to go to school. You chose to... Sorry, we can't pay it off. What? You can't pay off my school debt? No, sorry, we can't. But we need this program. Sorry, we can't do that for you. We don't have enough money. Then we're going to vote you out of office. We're going to put someone in there who will give us what we want. That's almost the way it works now. Now, again, I'm generalizing. I understand. There's always exceptions to these concepts. We're talking about a new trend where the deficit, the debt, is not even really a political issue anymore. It's not even a top priority. If you ask people, what are the top priorities facing our country in 2020? You're not going to get national deficit. Number one, national deficit. You're going to get things like healthcare, immigration, terrorism, crime, drug addiction. Who knows? You're going to get a list of things. I don't even know if the deficit would even show up in the average person's top 5, top 10. No one cares. We are in debt and no one cares. Let me go back to the article. Now, they give some information here. They talk about how Republicans, how Democrats, and they kind of go back and talk about some different ideas and some different things that have occurred, which is interesting, but ultimately it's not the point of this particular episode of this podcast. Let's go back here. Let's jump down. When I say go back, let's jump down here to... it says, moreover, the Republicans' cries about the evils of big deficits have been more theatrical than real, although the general perception of Democrats as more fiscally, crazy is really fake, or really not, is really kind of a false premise, because again, both parties will use deficit only when it benefits them. But now we've passed that bridge, we've crossed that bridge, and now it's kind of a dead issue. The deficit was $255 billion when Bill Clinton came into office. So $255 billion when Clinton came into office. At the end of his term, there were 4 straight small surpluses. Wow. So he came in with a deficit, right? The deficit was $255 billion. And at the end of his term, there were 4 straight small surpluses. This, along with the surpluses at the end of the Lyndon Johnson's presidency, are the only ones in the last 60 years. So we've only had surpluses under Lyndon B. Johnson and Bill Clinton, and those are the last ones in the last 60 years. The only ones in the last 60 years, all right? So that means everyone who's come into office, deficit. It's just the way it seems to go. The deficit soared under George W. Bush. I'm losing my voice. The deficit soared under George W. Bush, especially at the end of his term with the economic crisis. Obama inherited a massive $1.4 trillion shortfall, and in 8 years cut it by 60%. The shortfall has doubled under President Trump. All right, so it's gone way back up, crazy up. But again, Republicans, they're not yelling and screaming about it. And what's weird, the Democrats aren't screaming about it. What the Democrats are proposing are more programs to spend literally more money. You think they would be screaming, we're in a financial, a financial crisis is looming. The economy is going to be destroyed. The deficit has soared into the trillions. Something needs to be done. But no, every Democrat's like, hey, we need this program. We need this program. And you're looking at them going, between Trump, between you guys, where are we headed? Where is this all going to go? So I think that is crazy. They go on to say this. Even Washington's most stalwart and consistent fiscal hawk, and they give the name of the person who's the president of the Bipartisan Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, they acknowledge the budget deficit isn't a top policy concern right now, as low interest rates buy us some time. However, this person cautions that the fiscal situation is the worst it has been since just after World War II, adding, no one knows when the tipping point is, where the tipping point is, or when it's going to occur, or what it looks like, but those are questions we should want to find answers to. We don't know where the tipping point is, but no one seems to care about debt deficit. No one cares. Everyone's proposing programs to spend millions, billions, trillions of dollars. And it seems to be that's the policy. The top policy priorities are programs that cost trillions of dollars. Now, whatever you think about President Trump's idea to build a wall, whether you're for it or against it, you have to consider the cost of it. And we've seen all kinds of numbers, billions, who knows? We don't really know. But hey, spend it. Get that wall. Get that wall. Well, what about our national deficit? And then you'll have the Democrats proposing their programs. And you're like, well, wait a minute, we don't have the money for it. Doesn't matter. And then Republicans, they've got this plan and they got this plan. And everyone has a plan. And all the plans are only going to lead us greater into debt. And again, no one cares. Now, let's be fair here. Let's be very fair here. This is very important. If the politicians have lost all rhyme or reason, they've lost their sanity if they ever had it. We have to remember that part of the problem is the American public, as I described them earlier, as children who go into a store who just want with no thought of cost. And Americans just want more programs with no thought of cost. We also have to realize that not only you have the politicians, not only you have the people in America who want governmental programs no matter how much they cost, the average American doesn't seem to care about their own debt. Let me go to a different story. I think this is important. Listen carefully. According to Wallet Hub, about 35 million Americans still have holiday debt from last year. 35 million Americans still have holiday debt from last year. And guess what? People are going, I think today is Cyber Monday. People are going to be sitting there online, Amazon, order, buy this. On Black Friday, millions of Americans were out buying things. Many of them were out buying things and they were still in debt from last year. Our politicians can't seem to get a balanced budget. They don't care about deficits. They don't care about debt. Millions of Americans, they can't seem to balance their budget, and they seem not to be able to, or they don't seem to care too much about deficit or debt. Now, if it's true of the politicians, it's true of the American people when it comes to political policies and what they think is important politically. They don't think the deficit is a top priority. And if the average American in their own life, and many average Americans, they themselves don't care about their debt and their deficit, then let me say it again. We're in debt. And who cares? And it seems very few people do. Now, When I read these two news articles, I started thinking, well, the Bible says a lot about this. Now, I know some of these verses would be applicable to us as individuals, not necessarily, the political parties, because again, I don't think I'm not looking for a theocracy. I'm not looking to impose Christianity on the government per se, but there are some biblical principles that even the government should consider, right? Because the government, everyone, the individual, churches, everyone should consider at least what the Bible has to say in regards to debt, in regards to money. Now, this could be a lengthy study, but this is just an episode just to kind of bring this to everyone's attention, not necessarily to spend, 3 hours going through the Bible, the biblical teaching, but I have a list of verses, and I'm just going to pull up some of these verses, read them. I will try to provide some context, but the main thing we're looking for in these verses is just, what is it? What kind of idea? What are some of the general principles that we can take from some of these verses, even though they may have a different different context to them? They still give us a general idea about debt and money. And so I want to look at some of them. I have about 100 here. I'm just going to pick some at random, and we won't go too long, but just to give you some to think about. Proverbs 22:7. Proverbs 22:7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the slave of the lender. The borrower is the slave of the lender. Borrowing, deficit, debt enslaves you to the lender. All right? The borrower is the slave of the lender. When we get in debt, when we get a deficit, we, in a sense, find ourselves in fiscal slavery. We are enslaved to it, and we don't want that as much as possible. Yes, there's always going to be situations where you are, in a sense, borrowing or owing. If you purchase a new car, yes, you're going to have that car payment, all right? You owe until it's paid off. A mortgage on your house. There's going to be situations, but the general rule is we should do everything in our power to avoid it at all possible, because it's a form of slavery. You have this hanging over your head. It's like a weight dragging you down. Well, our country, go back to the story, the first headline, $1 trillion deficits. Trillion. Let me say that. Trillion. Okay. Yeah, that's a weight pulling our country down, and no one seems to care. 35 million Americans still have holiday debt, and they're going to go spend more money. That's a financial slavery. Romans 13:8 tells us, owe no one anything except to love each other, for the one who loves another has fulfilled the law. Don't owe anything else, just love people. Psalm 37:21, the wicked borrows but does not pay back, but the righteous is generous and gives. All right. Now, note, the wicked borrows but does not pay back. It is wicked to borrow and not pay back. We have a responsibility to pay back what we owe. But we live in a society that says, I borrowed it, I owe it, but I don't want to pay it back. I want the government to come in and erase my debt and take care of it, because it's not my responsibility. That's not the Christian attitude. The Christian attitude, if I owe it, I have to pay it back. I shouldn't look for a shortcut to get out of it. Romans 13:7, pay to all what is owed to them. Pay to all what is owed to them. Taxes to whom taxes are owed, revenue to whom revenue is owed, respect to whom respect is owed, honor to whom honor is owed. Pay what you owe. That's the biblical model. Pay what you owe. Don't look for someone else to take care of it for you. All right. Now, Luke 14:28 is really about following Christ and discipleship, but there's a principle there. For which of you desiring to build a tower, this is Luke 14:28, for which of you desiring to build a tower does not first sit down and count the cost, where he has enough to complete it? There's a principle there. Think Before you start, think before you buy something. Can you actually afford it? Count the cost. What is your budget going to look like? I saw this over and over and over when I was in the military. Here'd be a young airman, brand new airman in the military. Next thing they know, they're getting approved for credit cards, getting approved for this and approved for this loan and this loan, because the loaners out, the people who could loan the money, the credit card companies, they all knew these people are in the military. We'll get our money one way or the other. We'll contact the military and they'll take it from their pay. So they would just, hey, here, you can get a loan for this, you can get a loan for that. Whether they actually thought the people could, they never think about maybe this is not a good idea for this person to have this loan. Just let them have it. And here'd be these young airmen. And, a new airman in the military, and I'm speaking in the Air Force, obviously airmen. I was in the Air Force. These young airmen, don't make very much money. Next thing you know, they're pulling up at the dormitory with, a $20,000 car payment of who knows how much. And time again, they would find themselves in all kinds of financial difficulties, could not pay their debt, being called in to the supervisors, and then they're in all kinds of trouble because they cannot take care of their debt. And you're like, why would you go get that kind of car? Why? You could not afford it. And next thing you know, they're looking for some way to get out of it. They're looking for some kind of assistance. They're looking for some kind of help because they got themselves in a problem. Why? If you can't afford it, don't get it. You have to do without. That's what we tell kids. We can't afford this. You're going to have to do without. But no. And the Bible makes it clear that if you owe it, you pay it. It's your responsibility to pay it back. And the principle there in Luke 14 is count the cost. Consider it carefully before you make the purchase. Proverbs 22, 26 through 27. Be not one of those who give pledges, who put up security for debts. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? So don't be one of those who give pledges, who put up security for debts. Don't do that. If you have nothing with which to pay, why should your bed be taken from under you? Smart financial decisions. You've got to be smart. If you're going to, quote unquote, co-sign for someone, you got to make sure that you actually could pay it. All right. 1 Timothy 5:8 says, if anyone does not provide for his relatives and especially for a member of his household, he is denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. You've got to provide for your family. Well, you're not providing for your family if if all you're doing is putting your family in greater and greater debt. And you're like, well, one day they'll have this. Well, they're not going to have it if you can't pay for it. All right? And if all you're going to do is leave them mounds of debt, that's not helping your family. You cannot do that. Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. The Christian perspective is God is who we serve. God is the source of our joy. God is the source of our contentment. And so we won't spend money we don't have because we already have all that we need in our relationship with God and His Word and serving the kingdom. Now that's easy to say because guess what we all have? Wants, desires. This is confession time. All right. Anyone who knows me knows I absolutely love music. Absolutely. And not just that I love music. I guess you could call an audio snob, right? I want to listen to my music on the best sounding audio equipment that I can purchase. Now, when we first got married, man, I didn't have any good audio equipment. I was brand new in the military. We didn't have anything. So I used, I used a lot of just garbage equipment. But I saved, and then I was able to buy a new audio system. Now, it's not the one I wanted because I couldn't afford the one I wanted. but I saved. You got that one, and then moved on, and then moved on. And now I still don't have the one I want. I still do not have the one I want. I'm looking right here across the room at my Yamaha amp. I love it. And my Audio Technica headphones, love those. That's not the Yamaha amp I want. I mean, if there's someone out there who's rich and want to send me $7,000, I think the one I want costs between $6,000 and $7,000. I'll never own that one because I can't afford it. Now I could go out and probably find a way to finance it and be paying on it for the next 5 years, but no, I cannot do that in good conscience. That would not be wise to do and smart to do. I want it, but I cannot afford it. So I've always had to buy the best audio equipment that I could buy. I would have to save up and go, okay, now I can get this one. Now, that demonstrates that I still have wants and I still have desires beyond just God. Now, we're supposed to be content with just God, right? We are supposed to be serving God, but we all know that we have different wants and desires. I have a television. I'm picky about that. If I'm going to watch television, I want it to look absolutely the best it can look. I don't want it to look, I'm picky. I want my TV properly calibrated. I want it to look nice. I want it to be the highest definition I can possibly get. I want it to look the way it was intended to look. Now, I have a nice television. I have a very nice television. It's not the one I wanted because I couldn't afford the one I wanted, or I probably could have. We could have paid it off, but I made a decision. So we have to, I'm going to make this very clear. As Christians, it sounds good to say we should only be content with the things of God. Give me a Bible, give me a notebook, give me church, give me sermons, and I'm content. That's the way it should work. But the reality is it doesn't always work that way. But when we do have these other desires, even though it may not be the way it's supposed to work, at least we can do is not put us in a situation where we are in debt, where we have to have, this is very important, multiple jobs, which actually hinder our spiritual life, hinder our ability to service the kingdom of God, hinders our ability to serve God, to attend church, to listen to sermons, to study the Bible. But we have multiple jobs so that we can have nicer things, so that we can have a bigger house, bigger television. And I was bivocational pastor forever. Okay, then medically discharged from the military, declared 100% disabled. So I get my my military retirement, my disability. And because of that, now I can be a full-time pastor because my church wasn't able to support me full-time. And that's perfectly okay, all right? It would have been nice all those years of being bivocational, but it ultimately worked out for the best the way it did. Okay, it ultimately worked out for the best. There were times it was very depressing, and it probably hurt my family dramatically being bivocational. There's no question it hurt my family dramatically being a bivocational pastor, but you cannot go back and fix that. But the situation is, right now, I could get that receiver that I want, that Yamaha amp that I want. I could get the TV I want. All I need to do right now is go get a job. I could go get a job. And I wouldn't even have to be a full-time job, just be a part-time job. And just and do it for 6 months, a year. I could have the stereo equipment I want. I could have the TV I want. But guess what? I would be taking away the time that I have to record, to do live broadcast, to focus on the things of God. I could do those things. It would not hurt the church. Part-time job would not hurt the church. It wouldn't hurt the family in any meaningful way. But I would only be doing so for greed, for money. I'd be serving money. I would not be serving God. So it's something to consider. Christians have to have a different perspective than Washington and then the average people. Let's go back to some more passages of Scripture, all right? Proverbs 13:22. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, but the sinner's wealth is laid up for the righteous. Again, Proverbs 13:22, the principle there is simply wise financial decision that you have something to leave when you are gone. Now, again, that doesn't mean Proverbs 13:22 is not telling you go get 5 jobs, so all that you do is work, and you can leave an inheritance to your children's children. Yeah, wonderful, but you're still supposed to serve God first. God is supposed to be first. That's the way it's supposed to work. Proverbs 22:26. Be not one of those who give pledges, who put up security for debts. All right, Luke 16:11 says, if then you have not been faithful in the unrighteous wealth, who will entrust you to the true riches? Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Now, here is an interesting passage from the book of Deuteronomy, starting in chapter 28. Now, Deuteronomy 28 obviously are instructions for Israel, but it is kind of interesting considering how trillion-dollar deficits in the United States of America. Deuteronomy 28:12. The Lord will open to you his good treasury, the heavens, to give the rain to your land in its season, and to bless all the work of your hands. And you shall lend to many nations, but you shall not borrow. Israel was specifically instructed not to borrow from any nations. Do not get in debt. Interesting. All right. Now, of course, there's a whole context there. But, it would be great if the United States of America could stop being in debt and having a deficit. Proverbs 21:20. Precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. The foolish man just uses up everything, has nothing left. They don't save. They don't plan. All right. I think you're getting the idea. Hebrews 13:5. Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. For he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. We are to be content with what we have. We have Christ. We have his presence. We have the promise of his presence. We have his word. You've got to keep your life free from the love of money. Now, I will say this, and there's a lot. I probably got 50 more verses there we could look at. Here's the biblical model. The biblical model is pretty simple. Do not fall for greed, covetousness, and the love of money. It will ultimately destroy you spiritually. We have to put our focus on the things of God, and we have to ensure that we understand that we have a responsibility that if we buy it, if we borrow it, we pay it back. We have to have smart financial decisions. We have to make wise decisions. But those wise decisions doesn't mean that you do everything you can to get more money at the expense of your spiritual life. You cannot do that. Now, we could really take that apart, but I think you get the basic idea for this live broadcast of the Theology Central podcast. So, what do you think about the United States of America being trillions of dollars in debt, having a trillion dollar deficit, trillion plus deficit? Should that be a priority to any politician? When you vote in 2020, are you going to vote for the person who they're going to run on a campaign promise of cutting the deficit, of removing the deficit, lowering the deficit, working to get a surplus? That's their top priority? Or are you only going to listen to people who have plans that are going to cost countless amounts of money? And listen, don't fall for the doublespeak. If they say, I'm going to cut the deficit by, $500 million, and that's their promise, but then they've got 10 programs that are going to cost, way more than, $20 trillion, then clearly they're not going to cut the deficit. You can't, and when Trump was making any promise of cutting the deficit, you're like, give me a break. You want to build a wall that's going to cost billions and billions and billions of dollars. You can't, you're not going to pull off both. You want to increase military spending. You want to do this. You want to do that. You can't say, I want to do all of these things while cutting the deficit. It usually doesn't work unless you're going to raise taxes to some ungodly level that no one's going to have any money left because you're going to go to work and all you're going to do is hand your money over to Uncle Sam. Okay, that's that. You've got to listen. I don't think most Americans care. I don't think most Americans care what the national deficit is. Now, the problem is they don't care now. But what happens when we reach a tipping point? It's going to be too late to care then. And many Americans don't care about their own financial decisions. And many Americans are looking for reasons and ways for the government to take care of their financial responsibilities. Christians should be thinking differently about all of this. We should not support deficits and debt. We should want fiscal responsibility. As Christians, we should want it in our own lives. But the main point for the Christian, it's not just fiscal responsibility. It's not just how to have a big, bank account with all kinds of savings. It's about your spiritual life. It's about your spiritual life. Think of it this way. In a roundabout way, you can focus on the material. Money, job, property, houses, nice things. And you can do so, but you will end up with a spiritual debt, a spiritual deficit. That spiritually your life is going to be lacking and your spiritual life is going to be in debt. You're going to have a deficit in your spiritual life. You cannot so focus on the things of the world. Even if you're making wise financial decisions, you're so focused on wise financial decisions, making all the right financial decisions, but your spiritual life, there's a deficit. You're trillions of dollars in debts, using this as an illustration, spiritually. You're not doing the things that are required of you spiritually or what you should do because you're focused on even if you're making wise financial decisions. Some people say, well, look, I'm making all these wise financial decisions. I'm spiritual. Well, you are making wise financial decisions. Great. But that doesn't mean you're spiritual. It may mean you're so materialistic minded and greedy and so worried about money that you're not serving God. You're serving money. Something to think about on this Monday morning, December the 2nd, 2019. And I say all of this on the beginning of December, while many of you may have already been out Christmas shopping, but many of you are planning to go do more Christmas shopping. There's no easy answer there, because you could be one of those those Christian parents to say, "Hey, kids, we've got Jesus, and Jesus is the reason for the season. So just be content with Jesus. We're not gonna waste any money on Christmas presents." Yeah, you can do that, and when your kid grows up bitter and hates you, you got to think about how to approach that subject. You've got to do it in a way where you're not just creating bitterness, especially a child who unregenerate heart. You're not gonna win. You're not gonna do yourself any favor spiritually if all you're doing is making them hate Christianity and making them bitter about Christianity, because their life is suffering for a faith that they don't even truly possess and a faith in a God that they don't truly understand, and they're already suffering for it. It's funny how many Christian parents will make the kids suffer for the faith when they themselves won't count the cost or pay the cost of their faith. They want to pass that, hey, I'm going to do this for the family spiritually because this is what we should do. But you're making the kids pay the price, and they may not even truly be converted. Making lost people pay the spiritual price for following Jesus. Yeah, that's something to really think about. That requires some wisdom, and that's one of the difficulties of having children. Unregenerate child, unless you can truly know conversion has taken place, and then you've got to let that child work out their salvation with fear and trembling. You've got to give them the ability, but the parent will come in and say, hey, spiritually, I think we're watching too much TV, so no TV. Well, you made the decision for your spiritual life. Now you pass on that decision to the kid, and the kid's like, wait a minute. I don't even know if I'm a Christian, and why am I paying for you to live your Christian life? And B, maybe I am a Christian, but maybe I don't feel that that's the way it should go. You're dictating how they live their Christian life, which can, in some cases, create bitterness, and you're not allowing them to work out their salvation with fear and trembling. I know that's a whole different subject, but it comes down to this kind of subject sometimes, especially when it comes to Christmas. Well, we're a Christian family. We're not going to spend any money on gifts because we have Jesus. Well, great. That's a decision you made for your spiritual life. Now your kid is going to pay that price to follow Jesus. What if they're not truly following Jesus? You're making an unconverted person count the cost or pay the cost of following Jesus. Yeah, that's not only a bad financial, that may be a good financial decision, may not be a good spiritual decision for your kids, if that makes any sense. All right. Losing my voice on a Monday. I do apologize. I had a couple of situations there when I was talking, and I was having some difficulty with trying to say the next word or figure out what the next word is. Yeah, for those who do not know, I had a massive seizure on Thursday. Still a little bit foggy at times. Kind of frustrating. I probably should have given myself a little bit more time before I did this live broadcast. But so be patient and forgiving there for any stumbles that I had over words or trying to find the words. The fog of the seizure is pretty much gone, but it was one of the worst seizures I've had in a long time. So I should be completely back to normal. For some weird reason, this morning it's just everything's a little off. It's not quite. It's like I'm about 3 or 4 seconds behind, if that makes some sense. And so hopefully I'll be caught up here shortly. All right. But I wanted to bring this to you because I think it's an important concept. All right. I'll stop right there. I've already been speaking for 46 minutes. Wow. And there's so many more things we could talk about. But let me know what you think. Email me at newsif@yahoo.com. Newsif@yahoo.com. The national deficit. Should it be a priority? And if it's not, why do you think no one, or tell me this, why do you think no one cares anymore? Republicans don't seem to care. Democrats don't seem to care. The American people don't seem to care. Why does no one care? Tell me, what changed? What caused the change and the perception? There used to be a time everyone was screaming about the national deficit. No one cares. And just, again, consider when we go into, as you continue to watch everyone, vying for the presidency in 2020, listen to what everyone's promising. All the policies are absolutely astronomical in cost. Are we just going to have people who are going to spend more money? And who's going to be there when it all comes crumbling down? All right, I'll stop there. Everyone have a great day. Look forward to hearing from you. The VBC Bible Institute is now active, live. You've got your first reading assignment and your first required reading and your first assignment. You can listen to the VBC Bible Institute podcast. It's available on all podcast platforms, but the best thing to do is get the Spreaker app, Spreaker, Spreaker, Spreaker. Look for VBC. Once you find VBC, hit that little By Victory Baptist Church, and you'll see the VBC Bible Institute podcast. You can either be just a listener or you can be an active participant, and you can start working on your assignment. All right. Let me know if you have any questions about any of our podcast, and if you have trouble finding the Spreaker app, and if you are using the Spreaker app, please hit the follow button. Now, our numbers are going up, but they're going up slowly, all right? We want that number, listen, based off how many people were using our standalone church app, that follow should be in the thousands. We're at like 15 or 16. Hit the follow button, all right? Come on, people. I want that number up to 1,000 by the end of today. All right, everyone have a great day. God bless.